Hello, and welcome to the Producers Guild conversation with the creative team behind The Flight Attendant. We'd like to thank our friends at HBO Max for making this event possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Danielle Turchiano. Danielle is the senior features editor of television at Variety, where she heads up small screen series coverage across premieres, finales, awards season, and everything in between. She has also produced a number of independent short form projects and spent some time working as a social media manager, including for her Shih Tzu, Madison Chandler, Instagram.com/TheRealMrMadisonC. Welcome, Danielle. Welcome, panelists. And please, Danielle, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for having me. So obviously you guys have already heard, my name is Danielle, and it's not about me. I'm here to introduce the amazing panel for HBO Max's The Flight Attendant, which is Golden Globe and SAG nominated right now. So I want to just bring this dream team right in and welcome everybody. We have executive producer Sarah Schechter, executive producer, writer, and showrunner Steve Yockey, executive producer and star Kaley Cuoco, and executive producer Greg Berlanti. And I mean, really, this is, I think, one of the best teams on television right now, if I can editorialize and say that. And I want to hear from you guys about how you came together. I mean, Kaley, I know you've talked a lot about finding the book and loving the book. And so I want to know, how you brought everybody in and how you all fell in love with the story in order to put the show together.
I pretty much begged everyone that you see on here. I found the book about 3.5 years ago. And once I got the rights to it, I had this book and I was like, well, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? No idea. So I walked into the studio, I walked in to see Peter Roth and I'm like, I got the rights to this book. I think this is my Ardex show. And he said, are you going to play Cassie? It was a Friday. And I said, yeah. He goes, I'll read it this weekend. And he did. And Monday he called me. He's like, let's do it. And then we met with a handful of writers, showrunners, and met with Steve. And it was like an absolute no-brainer for us. He had such unique ideas and was so smart. And really, I was looking for someone who truly loved the story, not someone who, and obviously finding someone to adapt a book is very different than your own creation. So you had to be able to be open-minded. Then I told, then Peter Roth was like, I need you to go and meet with Greg Berlanti's company and Sarah Schechter. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, they're not going to want to do this with me. They're not going to want to do, why would they, why? Like, I was so nervous. So we go into the Berlanti offices and we first met with Sarah and I basically begged them to produce this with me.
It was very awkward.
Well, I wanted to say, I mean, like we have to hear it obviously from Sarah and Greg, your side. Like you guys have a huge slate of projects. So what made this one that is something you wanted to add ultimately?
Well, as a huge fan of the Big Bang Theory, as a huge fan of like Hitchcock and we talked a lot about like Goldie Hawn and Foul Play and a lot of those kind of films that we just love so much. It was a great idea. I think I personally was like very drawn to the subject matter of alcoholism and it felt like something I'd never seen before. And Kaley in this role was just like such a no-brainer idea. So we just felt, honestly, I actually remember the meeting being at your office, Kaley, which is hilarious. That first meeting.
No.
Was that our office?
Wait a minute. I'll never forget. We were in your waiting area and we had never met and you were just coming back with your dog with Jasper
and was not allowed on the lot, so
you were running in.
Possibly be there.
I'm like, oh, she has a dog. I'm like, this is gonna be good. This is a good sign. I can open with this. But no, we were in your office and I will never forget. I'm like, oh my God, she has the cutest dog. So that was a good sign for all of us.
I hired that dog just to win Kaley's. I don't have a dog at all. That was totally, I knew she liked dogs. No, but it was like talking to Steve, and Greg can speak to this. Greg obviously is a writer and I love writers and we both do. And it's always about the writer. And Steve was just he was so passionate about it, but also so clever about what he wanted to do with it, which is like not just a strict adaptation, but to really develop it and nurture it and let all of his weirdness into it. And I say that with total love. And I think that was the fun of it. And we talked about Hitchcock from the very beginning, but with that like comedy of a Goldie Hawn, I just don't think there's a lot of, and then, and then we started to work on it and obviously became a lot closer to Steve and to Kaley. And, I remember going to like the last taping of Big Bang and I was like, I just want to be there so she knows there's like something ahead of her,
Aww.
And that was the first episode of the Big Bang Theory I'd ever seen. And
she actually
very
went
funny.
She went to the mom stages. I'm like,
Right.
you're on the wrong stage.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, I mean, Allison Janney was our first choice, obviously. But no, so Greg also can speak to this, but we do as much as we do because we have incredible partners on everything we do. And that's the key. And Greg and I have an incredible partnership. And so for us, it's like the fun is being able to help and to, help to nurture and protect and just have done it a bunch. And so we can kind of, but honestly, like Kaley is such a natural born producer. It was really easy for us.
Yeah. I mean, the last thing I would just add is we can do the amount that we do because we're driven by other people's passion when it's not our passion. And it was so clear from the beginning that initially that how much this was Kaley's passion and the vision that Steve brought to that and the dialogue that they were having, and then truthfully, even within our company, the dialogue that Sarah and the work that she was putting in with them, I'm in some ways the greatest beneficiary of the talent of all of these people on this thing. I can offer my wisdom and advice at times about like, oh, maybe try this or do this, or what about this piece of casting? But the reality is so many times in this project, whether it was with, Steve's presentations or Kaley's performance, or when Sarah would come into my office and say what they were up to, I got to be the first audience. And that's the best. That's so rare in this business. You get to work on something that you really just get to respond and just enjoy. And it was really evident from the very beginning how special this was and how unique it was, I think.
So I want to talk to you, Steve, a little bit about that vision because, Sarah brought up Hitchcock, she brought up the alcoholism. There are some very serious and dark parts of the show. But then we have Kaley, who has done comedy for years and brings that so naturally that it felt like you probably couldn't do a show with her without a little bit more of a lighthearted bent. So walk us through a little bit about how you struck that balance. What did you go in saying, here's source material I love, but here's how I want to change it. How did that percolate?
I think I was pretty fortunate in that I was one of the, I think, early pitchers on the project before someone bigger than me came in and like swiped me out of the way. But it was actually a lot of fun. I read the material. I realized that in my mind, if Kaley was going to perform this role, it obviously had to have, it could be dark comedy, but you have to take advantage of that kind of timing and talent. So that has to be a piece of it. But the book itself is inherently a thriller and dramatic. And so, I think I pitched something wild and I kept thinking at each step of the way that someone would say no. But I finally got to Kaley and like 2 minutes into the pitch, she was like, can we hire him? And that was for a writer, that was amazing because I was like, but I do have to say, I think that's indicative of how Kaley is as a producer. She has a very strong gut instinct about things and makes decisive choices. And it makes it very, very easy to work with someone like that because you kind of always know where you stand. It's a problem that a lot of people have in television is sort of like waffling. Like, we could do this, we could not do this. And I feel like Kaley's like a knife through hot butter a lot of the time. I mean, it's like, she gets it done, which is fantastic. So for me, it was like the only thing that was a little funny was that every time I went into a meeting, I was told by the studio, Warner Brothers, that it was just a meeting. And every single meeting, people asked me to pitch the show. So I kept having to pitch spontaneously. So finally, by the time I got to Kaley, I was ready, even though it was just a conversation. But it was fun being surrounded by these other producers and all of the executives that worked with us, because really the adventurous stuff in the show, everyone was pretty supportive of the entire time. It was, the sort of like thriller parts of the show or like, plot points that people had questions about or notes about. But I feel very lucky that sort of the vision for kind of bringing the outside of Cassie's, I mean, the inside of Cassie's head to the outside of your TV screen, people were really on board for it. And so that was exciting.
I'd also say we spent several years, a couple years developing this. And I think Steve is also like sort of an incredible sponge, and he sort of notices every detail. And it was like draft by draft, Cassie had more and more Kaley isms, right? And which I think is that's just an incredible skill as like a writer and as a human to be so observant of behavior. And I think it just made the character so much richer. You don't often get the actor that early in the process.
Right. So
yeah,
Kaley,
it's a real gem of a situation to know who you're writing for.
Yeah. So Kaley, how did that affect your process? I mean, when you get scripts that you're seeing, this feels like me, this sounds like me, does that help you wear both hats at once, be the actor and the producer at once? Or do you feel like, oh no, I did need to lean on these guys a lot at certain moments, they needed to take the lead on producing and I needed to just focus on the performance?
Oh, I leaned on them the entire time. This is my first producing panel, my first producing project aside from Harley Quinn, which is very, very different. But I learned early on, Sarah, I would send her like texts on the side going, if we were on a group call, I'd be like, I have the dumbest question. I'm really afraid to ask it. And she'd write me back, there are no dumb, like ask. And I started realizing like, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm totally new at this. I have all these amazing producers around me who are holding me up. I mean, this team was unbelievable. Just look at Greg and Sarah and Steve and like all the producers. We would not have been able to do this without Team Berlanti. I mean, their team goes so deep. I bow to them every day because it was a gift being able to partner with them, and they just lifted us up. But these calls, this was all very new to me. I was also called the octopus on set because I had like 50,000 arms and everything. And I was able to multitask. That is a gift that I've always been able to do. And I could be very present. I can be present in my scene, and then I can be present on a phone call. And that is something that I really was able to do and I actually kind of thrived on. I loved it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's
and
good.
Kaley was a full-fledged producer all the way through. I mean, it was Steve. I feel like it was like once or twice where she was like, "I can't handle this. I have to focus on like performance." But she was very rarely.
She was like, "Oh, I'm not going to focus on that," and then she did anyway. So it wasn't even like
she'd be like, "I'm not going to focus on that." But I really think that actor in that coat on that set shot at this time of day is probably better. But I don't know. I'm not going to focus on that.
But I'm not going to focus on that. No, we're good.
Yeah.
Well, it's such a big show too, especially like talking about this being Kaley's first show as an executive producer of a scripted project, because, not only these big themes that we're talking about, but just the sheer scope of the globetrotting aspect of the show, which I'll be honest with you, like watching now is a dream because we can't leave our houses. So I did want to talk with you a little bit about, shooting on locations and why you felt that was important as producers to actually go places and show the scope of the world as opposed to just fake it.
I remember the first time I walked in with this idea, I was very like early before I even met anyone here. I said, we can't fake these locations. This can't be on a soundstage. And if we can't really do it, I don't want to do it. Which is actually really funny because then when we shot in Thailand, everyone thought that was a backdrop. So they were like, it looks fake. I'm like, God damn it, that was real. So, you can't win.
We learned a lot. Greg and I were very fortunate to work on the show called Blind Spot for many years. And Martin really, honestly, Martin Giro deserves a special thank you because he really figured out how to travel a show. And so we were able to help with that. But it was always a question of like where we were going, not if we were going.
We had some creative, we had some interesting creative issues with locations, and that the story originally in the book is set in Dubai, and we were denied permission to film this particular content in Dubai. Then we were going to film in Hong Kong, and then the sort of rioting and the anti-China demonstrations broke out, and then we landed on Bangkok, and that worked out great.
Yeah. I mean, I will say nothing looked fake to me. So
it looked so perfect at moments. There were comments of like people did question it, which just made me laugh. I'm like, of course, it looked too good.
And then we were shut down from COVID, and then one of the first shows back up from COVID.
Right, and so
they have the first hour long backup.
Yeah.
so that we could complete in time.
Right. So what do you feel like you learned from that experience? Like making the show pre-COVID and then making the show during and trying to make it all seem seamless?
Oh, sorry, Steve, go
No,
ahead.
no, please, Greg, go ahead.
I was gonna give a shout out to Marco Siega, who came in and directed the last couple of episodes post-COVID, because that's, and the crew in New York, and what they were pulling off during that time. It was because we were also the beneficiaries of learning from that, and then being able to start to apply some of the things we learned to the other shows as we staggered opening back up. So it was a real unknown thing. Obviously, you're so concerned about everyone's safety first and foremost. So, and you don't really know, like, well, how safe at first, like how safe can we make this, and what if people just aren't comfortable doing this or doing that, and how are we going to address those things? And I'd also give props to Warner Brothers, that I think really put a premium on that. Not that you can, but I mean, to the degree that it wasn't they never brought up a single dollar bill in terms of what it was going to take to get the show mounted again, and to and to make sure we were doing it in a safe way when the economics of that was such a question mark.
Mm-hmm.
And we were really fortunate though that we did all of our international travel early on.
Right.
That was a savior in the end. But it was also like being in Bangkok, and there's so much about Bangkok that is so exotic to people that live in Los Angeles, that I think it helped us in terms of like storytelling and being able to relate to Cassie's experience. And we couldn't read the street signs, and we couldn't, like that feeling of dislocation and being a stranger in what feels to them to be a strange land, was so helpful to be able to go to those places.
It's true. And I think that regarding the sort of production pause that we took, that was 2 weeks and then 6 months, the idea, we got lucky because the studio supported like a special dispensation for our line producer, Ray Quinlan, and our UPM, Bonnie Munoz, to negotiate kind of a standalone back to work plan with the local unions, which was far more stringent than anything that anyone's doing right now. It was one of the reasons that we were able to confidently come back. And I think, I know that Kaley and I had a brief conversation about this on set one day, but like coming back and like worrying about sort of health and safety every day, and having the safety meeting every morning, and kind of making sure everyone's like on task and focused. It sort of was a different level of producing, at least for me, because a lot of the little things that pre-COVID were kind of took up a lot of my time, sort of faded a little bit into the background, and it became much more about, let's do our job well, let's do our job quickly, and let's get this done. And I feel like the crew, like Greg said, the crew, everyone in New York really, really worked super hard to get that done. All of our post people worked super hard to get that done. And I think when you watch the show, you can't tell that there was a break in there, which I think is the victory.
Do you guys feel like you did it in a way that you would do it that way again for season 2? Like you're not going to wait until the pandemic is over? You're comfortable with how you figured it out?
I feel like we could go back and do it that way. I'm really hoping that by the time our writer's room has everything ready, that we'll not need to go back and do it that way.
For everyone's sake in the planet.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, you just may be a little more optimistic than me. That's partially why I'm posing the question. I do want to go back, Steve, to something you were talking about when you were talking about the story aspect of bringing Cassie's inner world outside and the creation of the Mind Palace. Obviously, for both you and Kaley, the creation of that literally as a physical space where we see her talking basically to herself, but manifesting as someone else. What inspired that? How did that answer a lot of questions that you guys maybe felt like you had in a way that didn't require, a number of expository sentences in dialogue or in
I think that's the trick to adapting a book, and not all books lend themselves to that. But the thing that Chris Bohjalian, the author, did so beautifully is you really feel trapped in these hotel rooms with Cassie in the book as she's going through this anxiety and what amounts to a nervous breakdown because of everything that's happening around her. And you just can't, it's not fun to watch someone sit in a hotel room and have a nervous breakdown for 8 episodes. So you have to figure out a way to physicalize it. And when I started talking to Kaley in the pitch about like PTSD, what that actually does to people, these images that freeze in your mind and how your mind then tries to make them less it actively works to make them less painful. And this idea of Alex kind of existing in her mind and then bleeding into her memories, bleeding into other parts, trying to solve traumas that weren't necessarily involving him. That's something that we all got really excited about.
Mhm. Kaley, how did that open the character up, if it did? I mean, do you feel like you learned more about her through some of her inner stuff than maybe the way she responded to other people?
Oh yeah, I mean the Mind Palace alone is actually what won Steve over for me. Like that was the first person that had come up with such a unique idea. I mean, it's hard. It's like coming up with something new is hard. We've done the ghost thing. We've done that. Like it's how do you keep it interesting? And I was so excited by that idea, and it opened up. It was a whole new world. We could kind of do whatever we wanted. It was this. So that was really all Steve. I give him full credit for that idea.
And he had it from the very beginning, and really, I think it's always great when you know what your ending is. So I feel like Steve was always really clear about what the end of that Mind Palace was for Cassie. So we were able to build towards it. But we spent a lot of time talking about the rules too. I mean, we didn't like endless time talking about the rules of the Mind Palace.
Well, I mean, I don't see how you don't, because it's real to her. And so if it's real to her, what does that do to her perception of the world? And then if somebody else is reacting to her perception, it could theoretically snowball the entire show.
Yeah.
And just looking at too, all of the really intense trauma that Cassie has had, not just from waking up next to Alex after he's been murdered, but what we learn about her childhood and the things that she's been in denial about and repressed to different degrees. A lot of that, those are things that if you're repressing them or if you're denying them for so long, sometimes it takes the trauma to shake it free. Sometimes it takes something else. I'm curious how you guys decided on how to let that come out for her.
I mean, I felt like it was just sort of like you want your character to have the longest journey possible across those 8 episodes, because then your audience gets to go on the longest journey possible across those 8 episodes. So if we're going to be unraveling a mystery in real time that Cassie's involved in, we're going to unravel this mystery that's happening inside of her, in her head and in her heart, like across roughly the same timeline. Mm-hmm. So it was really about deciding when she would have those breakthroughs and then tying them back to what was happening in the real world. And I think a big thing is that, just sort of you alluded to, trauma opens trauma. So a trauma in your adult life can all of a sudden unlock things that happened to you when you were younger. And so that's what happens in our series. And the thing that I thought was so great about it was, like, I'm pitching out this thing to Kaley and I'm saying and later in the season, this and this and this, and instead of becoming timid about it, Kaley was like more. Like, it was like she wanted to do all these things and tackle these things instead of in any way being like timid or reticent about it. And so that to me was like, it's not that I want to be working with this person. It's like, I need to be working with this person. So I then did everything I could to make sure I was working with this person.
Yeah. Do you guys feel like the Mind Palace, if that was not in the show, it would have been a lot harder to do the things that you're talking about in terms of having her get to those places? How much did that become not just a visually interesting thing, but also something that became necessary for both of you to get inside and from A to B?
I mean, it was just it was a great visionary piece. I mean, it was a great place to go. Again, it goes back to what I just said. It's hard to do something new. It's hard to create something new that's interesting. And to be able to pop in there, and like Sarah was saying, talking about the rules, kind of each day also, I was like, well, we could, we were creating this whole world so we could kind of do what we wanted, but we were trying to, stick by those rules or whatever. But I kind of felt this, like when I would get in the Mind Palace, and as I started getting used to it as the weeks went by, it became like like my crazy place. I could just kind of do whatever I wanted to do in there, and I did, and then we would, it became like my therapy room.
when you have a character who's like behaving poorly, and is externally doing a lot of actions that don't match necessarily what's going on in their inside, it's a real challenge to expose the audience to the internal struggles and the gulf between how we act and how we feel. I think Steve found like a really brilliant way to explore that, because it was it was definitely a big part of it. I think it would be interesting actually to watch a cut of the episodes without it. Could you follow it? Would you understand, but let's not do that. They're locked finally. Let's leave them be.
I mean, we've all seen it as is. I don't think we really want to.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that was fun
version of
about
it.
the other part of the Mind Palace that was really fun, and Steve certainly, we talked about this a lot, is just like, she didn't really know Alex.
Right.
He is someone that had this profound impact on her life, but she didn't really know him. It was like there was a lot of projection. So he became this incredible like mirror to what she was feeling, and who she thought he was really about discovering truth in herself. It's all sort of a journey towards truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say, for me, the Mind Palace is also another example of when you're working with fresh voices, like someone like Steve. I've been doing this so long now, and I would never have thought of it. And also there's a part of me that's like, oh, we've never done it before. I wonder if that'll work, and there's so many things in the show that are like that are risks that he took as a storyteller that I think make the show really feel fresh and something like you've never seen before, even though there's some more traditional elements, both in tone and style. And then to Kaley, the fact that this was her first big show like this and she was acting in it. And I've seen just regular executive producers making their first show, let alone being the star of it as well, like get into some, trying new things and having the kind of taking some of the risks that this show was taking, and just completely shut down. And the opposite was true. She emboldened everybody else and gave everybody else the faith to keep taking those risks. And, she met them head on, and it was really inspiring, and I think that that's so much at the root of why the show worked was the chemistry that they were all having, and the risk taking that was happening. And again, and the support of the network, because any one of these things, whether it's a damaged character as your lead, whether it's trying to blend the tone of, people have been talking about Foul Play and that tone for years. Everybody loved that movie. Everyone's tried to reproduce it, and it never really has whatever, and I feel like, and that was something we said to each other, all of us, at the top of it. And I'm really proud that it matches that tone, but really truthfully that Kaley and Steve found that a way to do it in a fresh way that feels like we haven't seen it before.
Going back to like when the scripts were starting, and then when the takes and then the edits and the cuts, because Greg would usually be one of the last one. Like we would wait to send him to the very end, so we'd all see it and tweak, and then finally the day where Greg would see it, and I text someone, did Greg like it? Did he see it? Did he see it? It was always like this, because he was kind of like the whiz, and by the way, the gentlest, kindest soul. But we always wanted to it was like wanted to make him happy, mm-hmm. But he was kind of the last decision maker, and. That was always a side note. Like, did anyone hear? Did Greg respond? Did we know? Did he like it? Do you like it? Do you like it? Are we fired?
Are we fired?
I know.
I do want to just say the support from Berlanti and the support from Yes Norman and Kaley too, because it's like exactly what Greg said. Like I want to take these big swings, and I've got this actress who I know can do this, and she knows she can do it, and we are going to do this, right? We're going to make this thing. Berlanti came on, and then all of a sudden it was like a group of people who, to Greg's point, we aren't reinventing the wheel. There's not like all of this new stuff in the show, but what we did very confidently, because we had a group of people standing behind us who were like, yes, we support this. Like, we support you from the network, the studio, definitely Berlanti, definitely Yes Norman, Suzanne and Mackenzie. Like, it was the environment, like to take those risks doesn't exist a lot, in my experience, in television. And so, especially with a network like launching, which was a whole new experience.
Well, yeah, you didn't know when you were pitching it initially either. This HBO Max didn't exist at the time.
The TNT show.
We were on a phone call once on hold, and instead of saying you're holding for TNT, the assistant's like, I have Warner Media for you, and we were like, what's that? Like, so yeah, it was
Yeah, I mean it's been quite a ride, and I mean it's interesting to hear you guys all use the word risk for a lot of these things, because yes, in a lot of traditional places these things are not common, but it feels like now this is the thing that the audience wants more and more of, these complicated characters, these not black and white stories. Does this give you guys, the success of the show, give you hope that more shows like this,
Yeah.
not copycats, but like
No,
that
no,
can
but
open a
but I
door?
but I think like specifically it is still a struggle to have complicated three-dimensional women on television or in film who make bad choices and aren't always likable and aren't always nice. And I think anything that can succeed in that space, which is expanding closer to reality, the complexity of what it is to be a woman in the world is important, you know, because I do think like the male character, Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, like they're allowed to do all kinds of stuff. And I want to give credit to Sarah Aubrey, who was like fully embraced, like a woman who was not nice all the time and wasn't always like doing things that were very like smart or good or the right decision. And men have been allowed to do that in film and television forever. And you see shows like this, or I mean, there's so many examples. I mean, Fleabag, and that's like audiences want this because it's their lives too. And so it's just really exciting to be able to do that. But we also had this secret weapon, which is we had a producer who, Kaley can get away with anything because she is so genuinely kind and good and smart and but kind. Like she's a good soul. And that kindness and that like joy for life and for other people and the compassion and empathy that she shows people, it leaks out even when Cassie is doing something really dumb. And that allowed us to go so far and was so much fun to be able to do. But that's why I think shows like this are considered a risk. I'm not sure why, but they definitely are. And there's always a lot of fear of women behaving badly.
Well, hopefully less now, especially as you guys go into season 2. I know we have to wrap up, but season 2 obviously will be a story from scratch because you finished the book in season 1. So I'm not asking for real spoilers, but how much bigger do you want to make this show? Do you feel like you set a bar for yourselves with what you can do in terms of the scale, the scope, the twists and the turns, and that you need to top yourselves? What's the plan?
We're not going to compete with Tom Cruise and try and go to outer space. We're going to leave that to him and Elon Musk.
Okay.
We did
That's
set
good.
the bar pretty high. The bar is set high. And I said this early on. It's like now the work starts even more so. You know, we want it to be as good. We want it to be new. We want it to be exciting. I think what I truly love about this show is it was so clear. You know, I learned the word tone came up a lot, and it was but we punched it. It was like we believed it. You watch the show and you believe, whether you're on the ride with us or not, like we went full force and we didn't question it. There was no wavering. It was very, very clear, and it took us a few years to figure it out, but it ended up being super clear, and that's what I appreciate about it, and I want to keep that going through season 2, you know, and not waver from that.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.